Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. France, why France want to continue its colonization in the Caribbean and Africa. Yes my friends, for hundreds of years France would have been running a tax scam in Africa and in the Caribbean, tax and resources scam in Africa and the Caribbean. This is all about money, my friends. This is all about money and power. And in this video, I will explain exactly why France wants to continue its colonization in Africa and the Caribbean. France, my friends, has many overseas territories all around the world. They have overseas territories still in Africa and in the Caribbean. Just a few videos ago I did on what is happening in our Caribbean island nation of Martinique and Guadeloupe. These two island nations are France overseas territory still, my friends. And then in Africa, France have some countries in Africa they call francophone countries that were past territories of France. These countries are Ivory Coast, Gabon, Guinea, Dahomey, Burkina Faso, the Congo, Mauritania, Niger, Senegal, French Somalia. See, they even went into East Africa, Chad. And my friends, you have the two African islands of Madagascar and Mauritius, my friends. But why? Why France want to continue? For example, in Africa, they are getting resources from these former colonies. How? They install puppet governments in the West African francophone countries, and they then pay the leaders and get them to give them resources at a very, very, very ridiculously cheap price. In Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, you know why Niger overthrew the French, my friends? They overthrew the French there because, imagine, Niger produced uranium, a material, a resource used to generate electricity. And they send all of that to France. France is getting uranium for basically free. And they generate electricity, get 100% of France. Lights all over, power. Cheap, cheap power. Whereas the place that is generating the uranium has 80% without electricity. That's crazy. And then not only uranium, you have cocoa, you have gold, diamonds. They get all of this from Africa. And then they send all that resources to France in their factories there in France to refine. They make their gold watches, their diamond bracelets, their cocoa tea. They package their coffee, the all type of products. They then send it back to the same Africa and the Caribbean and charge exorbitant prices on the world market, make up to 250% profit. That is one way France keeps its economy running, my friends. Now, why, you may ask, do they need the Caribbean territories? Well, Guadeloupe and Martinique, they have to pay taxes. They pay taxes to France. So France is diversifying the economy. You know, when you have a business and you're selling bread, for example, then you open a shop that's selling fruits, then you open a hairdressing salon, then you go into agriculture, then you go into construction. That's diversifying. You're diversifying your business. Well, France have this resource and tax scam that they are doing all around the world. They are diversifying their economy by taxing their overseas territories stealing resources from them at the same time, and getting France rich. France do not have any resources, my friends. France have a lot of gold, underground chambers of gold, and they do not have any resources. They do not produce gold in France. How do they get that gold? Africa, my friends. Haiti, for example. Haiti paid taxes to France for hundreds of years. Imagine Haiti had to pay France taxes for hundreds of years just so that France do not invade them and take over Haiti again. So Haiti had to pay France to stop France military from invading Haiti. And this was backed by America. America gave France a permission to invade Haiti if Haiti does not pay any taxes to France. So this is how France operate, my friends. They operate by taxing their colonies, by stealing resources and building up France, my friends. This is just, let me just read, even Louisiana, you know Louisiana in the United States. Louisiana was a French territory. France sold Louisiana to America back in the day. And that is how Louisiana state, the state of Louisiana, became a part of the United States of America. Quebec in Canada was sold to Canada by France. So you see what's happening? France sells Canada, Quebec, sells Louisiana to the United States because they're all partners. But they're not going to give Martinique their independence. They're not going to give Guadeloupe their independence. They're going to keep meddling in the affairs of African countries. That is how France operates. France, the United Kingdom, and the USA, they're like brothers and sisters, cousins. They're like family members, my friends. They're all working together. And that is why I say this channel is to bridge the gap between Africa and the Caribbean, my friends. That is why I want you to subscribe to my channel. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to my channel, liking this video, sharing it with all your friends and family, my friends. In the Caribbean region, for example, France has several overseas territories. They have Guadeloupe, they have Martinique, Saint Barts, and half of Saint Martin, my friends. Why we must be asking ourselves, why do France need overseas territories if they're not gonna get resources? Well, France has a plan. If they're gonna get the resources from Africa, they can use some of the territories to build military bases. They get some to tax them, and they're building an empire all around the world. And because France does not have any natural resources to sustain France, it needs to continue its colonization throughout the world. It needs to continue its diversification model of having all these overseas territories and puppet governments in Africa, so they can continue stealing resources, building up France by processing these resources that they get for almost free, so they can make products to sell back to the world market to make money. And they make money all around by taxing their overseas territories. Some of these francophone countries, they're using francophone money produced by France. France print many of the African countries in West Africa the money from their country and send them. So France controls their currency. And this is another way France make money off of Africa, my friends. France have many overseas territories, 12 of them. They are Guadeloupe, French Guyana in South America, Martinique in the Caribbean, Reunion off the coast of Africa, Mayotte off the coast of Africa, New Caledonia. That's, I think, that is close to America. You have French Polynesia. You have Saint Barts. You have Saint Martin. You have Saint Pierre. You have Miquelon. There's so many of them. You have the French in the southern and Antarctic lands. You have Wallis. You have Fontana Islands, which together is almost, all those territories together is almost 2.6 million people. So they are part of France. So that's 2.6 million people paying extra taxes. So France have their overseas business. That is what you call overseas business. They have businesses in France and businesses overseas. That is how France look at it, my friends. And we need to wake up, because most of these Western countries, they get their wealth by stealing, by slavery, and by colonization, and by unfair financial systems that they set up all around the world, my friends. And that is how these countries continue to be superpowers. They're not really any superpower. They are just continuing to steal, and by doing their illegal taxation all around the world, my friends. Why they continue to tell us we should work hard and we should do the right thing. They continue to use countries to make money, and they continue to steal the resources from Africa, my friends. But I say we need to wake up. We need to bridge the gap and figure out ways and means how to strengthen ourselves, because we see how all these Western countries are making money, my friends. We need to do the same thing. Trade between Africa and the Caribbean and North America. We have our African brothers and sisters, black Americans in America, the United States of America. Black Americans, African Americans. Some like to be called black Americans, some like to be called African Americans. We are one people. Name is just a name. But we are one people, separated by only slavery and colonialism, my friends. Because when the ship came from Africa, it went through the Caribbean and went up to America. So they dropped off some enslaved Africans in the Caribbean and dropped off some in South America, dropped off some in South America, my friends. So we are one people, separated by a brutal transatlantic European slave trade, my friends. But thank you for watching this video. We're over 14,000 subscribers already, and that is because of your continued support. So I say thank you, thank you, thank you, my friends. Make sure to like this video, share it with all your friends and family. My name is Bjorn, and I'm signing out for now. I'll see you again in the next video. Bye-bye.